Hey fellow vinyl cleaners, what we're going to do today is we're going to use these reusable fittings and put them on our pressure line. Make sure that everybody understands how these work. So we're going to zoom in a little bit closer so everybody can see it, but this part, you may see it in your parts list as an AD-01, and this is the pressure line that we use in our wash hoses. And sometimes people have some difficulty getting these to work right, and there's some confusion, so that's why we're going to focus on this, and you'll be able to respond whenever your hose needs some repair. So let's take a look and see what's going on. All right, so again, here's that fitting, that AD-01 that we're going to be using. Just to give you kind of an overview of parts that we're going to use and tools throughout the process here. This obviously isn't a perfect world environment where you're back at your shop or something. You might have to omit some of these things if you're doing a repair on the truck, but you can still do a very quality job right on the truck too. But in today's lesson, we're going to have, in my opinion, I'm lazy, so I have a ratchet, battery powered ratchet with an 11/16 socket. You want that on there. If that socket isn't possible and you're working on a truck, make sure you have an 11/16 wrench, combination wrench actually, and you're probably going to use the closed end side more than anything. With that, we're also going to use a 13/16 wrench, that is, as well, and that we'll use in both environments. I've got just a little piece of wire. It's not fancy, but I'm going to use that to make sure that once we have the fitting on there, that everything's clean and it's not plugged, and I'll explain why we do that a little bit later. We're going to use a lubricant that'll help our job a little bit easier and make the two fittings actually thread together a little bit quicker. And probably last but not least, we've got a little handheld torch. I like this style. As you pull it, it immediately fires, but and I'll show you why we use that too. But let's go ahead and begin, shall we? So first of all, you're going to notice as we cut it, and this one is pretty rough, but you get some frayed ends. So you want to make your cut as square as possible to the hose. But in the process, depending on how sharp the tool that you use, whether it be a razor or a knife or whatever, it may fray the ends a little bit like this one is. I don't know if that can be seen in the video or not. And so in a perfect world, you want to try and deal with that, because if that's left the way it is, eventually those ends are going to kind of unthread, if you will, and then you're going to basically at that point rely on just the inner portion of the hose. So by using this fancy dancy torch we have here, we're just going to put a little bit of heat to these frayed ends, and it'll melt them together, and the life expectancy of this connection that we're making is going to drastically improve. So let's just take a look at this, provided we turn it. There we go. So again, not a lot of heat is required. You see how I'm holding it away from the hose. We're just kind of cleaning those ends up just a little bit. And then what I do for myself is I just kind of work it, trying not to burn my fingers in the process, which does happen from time to time, but that's why I have good calluses on my fingers. And then you'll see those frays now are gone. There's just a little bit there, but for the most part, because this hose has a little bit of plastic in it, that melts and puts a very strong bond between all those fibers that are in there. So the next step is we take our fitting. You notice it's a two-part fitting. So we'll thread the inner part away from the outer part. And this is the outer part. This is the part that leads to all the confusion, because it is reverse thread. And so what a lot of people do is they just think it's standard thread. They put it on there and they just turn it and crank it and they're forcing it, and it just doesn't thread on. But it's reverse thread. So keep that in mind, reverse thread. And this is where our 13/16 comes into play. So again, our 13/16 combination wrench, we're going to use a closed end. I like to hold it like this. So I'm putting pressure, down force if you will, to thread it on. And it's already getting a good grip. And that fitting now is going to thread all the way down. And we're going to show that in just a little bit, that you need to thread that fitting all the way down for the fitting, the inner part and the outer part, to get a good nice clamp on this hose. So let's see if we can see that in the video. So now I've got this thing threaded all the way in. Basically is it when it's down all the way. At this point, we're going to take our lube. The one I like to use is the Penetro 90. It's a very, very high quality lube that works in there, spray lubricant. And I just put a little shot in there, just a little bit. So nothing, doesn't have to be a whole huge amount, just a little bit, just to give it this fitting right here, this cone to actually thread into the inner part of that hose. So we stick it in there and we try and get it started. As you can see, it's not starting very good. So then what do? Well, one trick, and this works very well on the truck, is to thread this out just a little bit. Sorry, wrong direction. Even I get confused by the left-hand thread. Thread it out just a little bit and get a thread or two started on the fitting, which it has now, and then thread it back on to the hose. Once it's threaded back on, you get it nice and tight again. Then you can finish either with the tools that we have here, which I'm going to take advantage of the ratchet and the vise, which makes my job a little bit easier. Or you can also just do it basically on the truck with a 13/16 wrench holding this side, and then your other 11/16 spinning it by hand on the other one. But since I've got a vise and I've got this battery powered ratchet, we're going to thread it together. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, it's almost done. We don't just stop, because if we stop, there's a little bit of a gap in there, and that means that the two fittings aren't compressed together. We want them tight together, so we're going to continue to turn this, and you'll definitely feel it when it comes to a stop, which it just did. So now those two fittings are together. We think we're done. In a perfect world scenario, which is what we have here in a shop, I like to double check and make sure that nothing has happened to the inner part of that hose. In 20 years, I've had it happen once, that for some reason the inner part of the hose somehow grabbed on to this fitting, the part that goes on the inside, and as we threaded it together, it actually twisted the inner core of the hose. And so after that happening, I realized, because no water was coming out at that point, I had to take it all apart and fix it. But I realized one little quick check will just confirm that that didn't happen. So it was a freak thing. I don't expect that it'll happen to you, but it just takes a second to check it. So now that fitting is threaded on nice and tight, and it's ready for some action. So let's put that thing to work. So thanks again for watching. We're going to make some more videos.